Welcome back to Bastard Sword. I'm Drew.
And I'm Josh.
Thanks for coming back to episode number 21, our first one after we crossed that big milestone with Resident Evil 5. We kind of lied to everyone. We have been talking about how we were going to cover Resident Evil 6, and I made a last-second decision to punt on that. We made the decision together. I'm not making executive decisions here on my own, but
yeah,
that game was a lot. I actually like it, but it's kind of longer than I had realized, and it just sort of, I didn't really bounce off of it, but I think we'll probably come back around to it at some point, but we're just going to kind of put it on the back burner because it's a lot of game and we've had some other things distracting us, and that's what we're going to talk about this week.
Yeah, I still haven't even touched Resident Evil 6. Like, I kept meaning to go back to it, but I know that it is a very large game. Like I said, I dropped out around the third campaign in that game, like the first time I played it. So yeah, we'll lie to you sometimes. We may not cover the game that we intend on covering, and that's all right. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff coming out right now, so we want to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't think Resident Evil 6 is terrible, but I also don't really think it's good, and there are good things happening. Yeah. So we've been kind of distracting ourselves with those. So we'll come back around to that eventually. We're also going to take a minute to catch up on some news things that have been going on. We don't do that very often. I don't really think of this as like a current events news podcast, but sometimes when there are big, interesting announcements, we do want to cover them. And that's what we're going to do today with a few quick things that I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time on, but we're going to say words about them.
Yeah, I mean, we usually only go for like the news stories that interest us. There's a lot of stuff going on in the gaming world, and we're also trying to play like full games in between. I've been jumping back and forth on like 4 or 5 different games right now. So news number 1, we got some Disco Elysium Splinter Studio Madness. That almost sounds like a Metal Gear Solid title.
A little bit, yeah. It's just been weirdly fitting for the topics that game deals with and everything, that it was this lightning in a bottle experience. And we just put out an episode on that a couple weeks back, and the timing kind of worked out that it's been actually probably a couple weeks now, very shortly after we dropped the episode, but a whole bunch of news started pouring out about all of these studios that have formed in the ashes of, I still never learned how to pronounce the name of the studio that actually put out Disco Elysium. Zaum.
I always say Zaum. Zaum. Yeah, something like that.
Zaum. Yeah, well, I'm not even going to learn right now because fuck them. But after they kind of shuttered all of the original team that made that game what it is, I guess everyone went in their own direction and started forming their own little offshoot studios to make the one true spiritual successor to Disco Elysium. And as of right now, or at least as of when I made these notes a couple days ago, we have 4 new studios, ? In addition to Zaum still existing in some capacity.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I imagine there will be 2 more by the time we drop this episode. So, yeah, we'll be outdated somehow.
Right, definitely. So the first, a lot of these were literally announced. I think 3 of them were announced on the same day or within like 2 days of each other at most. So one of the first ones was Dark Math Games, which is run by, oh God, I'm going to butcher his pronunciation too, and I'm sorry. Kaur Kinder, who was Disco Elysium's producer, who they revealed a game called XXX Night Shift. It has an actual trailer and a Steam page and everything. It doesn't have a release date, but it does look and sound very Disco Elysium-y, aesthetically and mechanically. Did you look at the trailer for that or anything?
I did not. This is the one that's like all red, and they put out some. Didn't they put out like some? Oh yeah, I did see some of this. I think it was it this company that made like the red promo thing that kind of looked like a manifesto?
No, we'll get to them in a second.
See, that's my problem already, is that like all of this announced at the same time, and I just like kind of got overwhelmed and checked out. Like I basically went in to check if like Curvitz was involved.
And spoilers, he's not with any of them.
He's not. He's not involved in any of these. I know some of the more like core staff are involved in the other one. I think that was Long Due or Summer Eternal. Yeah,
Summer Eternal is the one that a lot of the core writers are involved in, and that one is probably the most interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this Dark Math Games, they're the only one that announced an actual tangible product and put some stuff out, and it does look very Disco Elysium, although without a lot of the writing talent and everything on board, it's hard to tell what's really going to happen with that. You could see some of the writing and everything in the screenshots, and I mean, it looks fine. It's just, it's hard to tell without, seeing how everything actually kind of interacts with each other and like what kind of narrative threads they're putting together. It, at the very least, has like some nice Disco Elysium looking wallpaper. You play a patrol operative and you solve some murders in this like, very cold place. You are at World's End, Antarctica, in the year 2086. So not a whole lot of information to go off of to get me super excited. It looks like it has very Disco Elysium style stat distribution and everything. Definitely aiming to be a spiritual successor to that game. Just, I don't know. I mean, it has at least the producer from that game, but like the heart of that game is, well, so many things actually, but really just the intricacies of the writing. And I don't know. We really won't know how that'll go until it's something people are able to actually put time into.
Yeah, and I find it so odd that like they're all kind of copying the same look and presentation. I mean, there are many different ways to do a game like this, and I feel like we're getting that wave of Souls likes again, but we're getting Disco Elysium likes that just kind of visually cop what I don't know. I don't know if that's really what makes Disco Elysium stand out.
No,
I mean it's nice to have a clean UI, but I'm kind of like, all right, so it's just a recreation of that basically.
Yeah, and actually the Souls-like thing is an interesting comparison because there was a huge wave of Souls-likes after basically 2011 when Dark Souls started getting traction, and then it took developers a few years, starting with Lords of the Fallen was the first big one in 2014, and then there was just a flood of them, and it took literally until like last year with Lies of P, and I would say Lords of the Fallen, although some people may disagree, but it literally took over a decade before people were able to really catch on to what made Souls games actually work.
Yeah.
And start putting things that were of a comparable quality. So I could see this going the same way.
Yeah, I would say for me, like Lies of P was one of the first ones that kind of nailed it, even though it is a lot different than like Bloodborne or Dark Souls, but it has that feel, it does a lot of things right. So I don't know. Visually, I like how this game looks. I mean, it looks very interesting and kind of has its own visual style, but what scares me is they say true detective in that last line, and then it's in Antarctica. And that it just makes me think of that last season of True Detective that sucked ass. So,
oh no,
that's my review on True Detective season 4. It sucks ass. But yeah.
Well, I'm not going to start watching that series now, so thanks.
No, you should just watch the first one. That's all you need.
Okay,
that's
fine. Yeah. So we also had Long Due Games, which I think you mentioned them already, but they announced themselves as a company that exists, and it's got some people from Zoom, from Bungie, Rockstar, and some other studios. They didn't announce a game. They didn't give any kind of solid information. They did say their future game will be a psychogeographic RPG with the world itself reshaping based on characters' decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, none of that means anything to me.
Yeah. That sounds like a No Man's Sky pitch. Like, it will change the way that you think about video games. Or, I mean, I'm all for like branching paths and, character choice and everything like that. But reshaping the world itself, I mean, it's the whole structure of the game going to suddenly change because of dialogue decisions. I just don't know. They are They're hiring remote writers, though. We should get in on that.
Oh, hey, yeah, I'll send an application over. Actually, just consider this podcast a formal application for both of us. So someone send this to Logdo. Also, cut out this next part we're about to say. So I know we've talked about this some, but I like all of the studios that are involved with that to various extents. I could not possibly see anything in Bungie or Rockstar's past that would give me any remote sort of hope about being able to pull off something that achieves, even a like similar ballpark to the type of things that Disco Elysium does.
Yeah, I'm hitting X to doubt on that one. They've just never really been great at games with player choice, and they've never really made an RPG or anything of that scope. It's not to say the staff involved can't, but until I see something, it's kind of hard to trust that sale they're trying to make,
Yeah, it's just like coming to you from the people who brought you Destiny 2 and Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
The Disco Elysium follow-up you've all been waiting for.
Right. It just doesn't quite track mentally for me. And we've complained, or maybe I have complained about this before, but they said that Red Dead Redemption 2 would have a lot of player choice and dialogue interactions, and it amounted to nice and mean. So I'm kind of wondering what they'll do there.
And again, no idea when we'll actually see anything from that.
Yeah.
The other one that I don't know how optimistic I am about it, but I am definitely intrigued by it is the one we hinted at earlier, Summer Eternal, which features a lot of the writers from Disco Elysium. And it is this bizarre amalgamation of an art project and game studio. Actually, the website literally says game studio / art collective. It's all this really bright red, intense red and black, not anarchistic, but communist type of imagery all over the website. The website has a huge studio manifesto that's 4 pages long and just going on about the meaning of art and how capitalism just snuffs out all creativity and makes the world worse and blah, 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 and has a bunch of just different writings and blog posts and just this grandiose posturing all over the website. And it's so maximalist that it's kind of fucking incredible. I love the tone of it so much.
The profiteer knows that by keeping your dignity low, he will keep you crawling on the treadmill of passion until he lays you off for the sake of the red number in his book. It's clear that someone is very mad at the Zaum investors.
Yes. Yeah. At a very, very minimum, it definitely carries the same spirit that you got from Disco Elysium, at least politically. They even have a section on their website talking about the ownership structure of the studio, which is that it is entirely worker owned. It is partially player owned. They literally are leaning into the whole every worker a member of the board thing to an extent. So it's great. It looks very interesting. They also haven't announced any games or anything, so it's hard to tell what would actually come from that. But I love the spirit behind it. I am there for whatever happens with that.
Yeah, and they're putting on even on the bottom of the website there, some of the staff that's involved, and we can see that Lenville Brown, who is the narrator of Disco Elysium, I'm pretty sure, I'm 95% sure.
Yeah, he is.
I started to say that, and I was maybe I need to fact check myself, but I recognized him from his streams of playing the game. So he's involved. I think Argo and Olga were also pretty involved with the game, so that's a good start, but it's hard to tell what they will put out. But, having all those different art styles and approaches in Disco Elysium worked in its favor. So,
yeah, I guess my concern with them, and I hope it's unfounded, but it seems like they definitely have the right attitude. They have the talent for writing and creating this kind of work. I just hope that they also either have internally or are able to attract the technical knowledge to make it an actual functioning, playable game that can achieve everything they need it to do.
Right. Yeah. I hope they don't build it in Unity. As much as I love Disco Elysium, that's the one thing I could say that I hate most games built in Unity, but every now and then they're fine. So,
No, it's going to be Unreal Engine 5.
Fine. I'll take it.
Yeah. So then the other one that's floating around there that hasn't been formally announced is whatever Curvitz is doing. So they have this company called Red Info Limited or Red Info Ltd, which was apparently incorporated in June 2022, which based on what I could see, it looks like people just kind of like found that. There wasn't even a formal announcement or anything. There is literally nothing known about this, aside from the fact that Curvitz and Alexander Rostov are both involved in it. And so be interesting to see what happens with whatever they're doing, but there's just no information.
Yeah, so we have a few others on here. Key people involved in the drama. Okay, so never mind. I was reading this article wrong, but we don't really see anything about that right now. And yeah, no announcements. If it's being involved is good. Like I've said before, like it's hard to imagine any spiritual successor to Disco Elysium that works without Curvitz. My hope is that maybe they can get like part of the IP or the licensing or the rights back in some capacity, or at least the world. Another thing I forgot to mention to you, Drew, I did see some information. I don't know if it was Curvitz personally, but they were describing how the sequel would have looked, basically saying it was going to be in a larger part of Jamrock, and you would have what's his name, John, as your cooperator, but you would also have other, like you could actually form a party in this game.
Oh yeah.
And so like he was kind of describing some of the details of that sequel, and I just wanted to share that because it's like, damn, dude, that sounds great. Like expanding the world, just doing everything the first game did, but bigger and better. We don't get to see that happen.
I know. And also how we had mentioned the XXX Night Shift game, I think it was, where it said that your decisions will like reshape reality around you or something. I believe, and don't fact check me on this or whatever, but I think I saw people saying that was an idea that had been floated as like one of the core gameplay concepts of Disco Elysium 2 as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it hard to picture that. It's gotta have some like drastic shifts to work properly, or like layers of maps that change and like the assets change or textures or something. Like I just don't really understand how they would do that.
I sort of see that as more along the lines of like in Disco Elysium, if you go with like the Cop of the Apocalypse route and are just constantly floating these concepts out there that they kind of become true, and then that is the direction the world takes around you, is sort of how that would work in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying there, but it's also like it doesn't literally change it. Like it's Harry.
Not in the first one,
it's like implied that Harry's just saying shit.
I could see a version of that in my mind where by saying enough of that shit, it actually alters your vision of reality, and that kind of becomes the reality that you live in around you. Like I could see a version of that working out and being cool.
Yeah, it really could. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, would you change the maps? Would you add, like, have like a city and then like in one...
It's just going to be a Silent Hill thing. You turn it to the dark world. It's fine.
Yeah, just retexture everything and make it a little sloppier, or like a utopia on the other side, and then like factor in player dialogue choices and stuff into that. Also, it's a cool concept. I'm just wondering like how functionally that would actually work,
Yeah, it's a cool concept. It's also some Peter Molyneux shit that
yes, exactly.
Who knows if it'll actually happen. Yeah. But yeah, I'm happy to see that most of the people involved in making Disco Elysium a thing are out there trying to recapture some of what that was. I'm apprehensive about how all of that will work. It has been moderately entertaining and a little bit depressing to see the sort of drama floating around. But hey, with 4 different studios working on something and the game clearly inspiring a bunch of other creators, it's at least making its mark. It's leaving a legacy. Even if we're not getting a Disco Elysium 2 necessarily, I am glad that we're going to get something that kind of continues on its spirit.
Yeah, and even if like one of these games come out and they're not necessarily like, they don't follow like the spirit of or tone of Disco Elysium, that doesn't mean they can't make a good game out of those working parts. So, you know, I'm going to try to be optimistic for whatever comes out until we see more and, you know, actually have an idea of how the game is going to play or look. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's a positive trend to move in that direction of these dense narrative led games like that to me. So just wanted to mention some of those studios and what's going on. Other news that I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but at least a little bit. Another big thing that floated around a few weeks ago now, but Halo. So this series has been kind of floundering around for a while, but they put out an announcement recently that 343 Industries is rebranding and they're moving away from their proprietary engine to Unreal Engine 5.
Wow.
So yeah.
Halo, wow. Never heard of it.
Halo, never heard
Would
of
you
that
explain
game.
the entire lore of Halo to me right now?
Do you remember Alien?
Yeah,
it's kind of
love Alien.
Yeah, it's kind of that.
Okay,
basically that,
but with the Spartans.
No Spartans, just Alien.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought this was kind of interesting for a couple reasons. So Halo, I used to be a huge Halo fan, and Josh, you said you were never really an Xbox guy, right? So this series mostly missed you.
Yeah, like, I mean, I had friends playing it all the time, and, you know, I would play like split screen multiplayer, just hop in with friends every now and then if it was around. But I can't say I've like ever sat down and played any of the Halo games all the way through.
Yeah, see, I did. I got really into them. I got really into the lore and everything, such as it is. I mean, it's like sci-fi schlock, basically. Like, I would classify it in B-movie territory that tries to reach a little beyond that and sort of falls down when it does. And then it turns into this big, like, overly dense web of just inane nonsense that you have to read through a bunch of novels to even interpret, whatever. But I loved it for a while, and it was just it's interesting to me how it was such a massive franchise. Like, it was a system seller. It is the series that built Xbox as a brand, and now it's just like barely existent. People got a little bit excited for Halo Infinite for a little bit, and then that just faded away, and it's like a C-list gaming series, it seems like now. And I thought it was sort of interesting how people have responded to 343's treatment of Halo. So Bungie left after Halo Reach, which was like 2011, somewhere around there. So yeah, Bungie left, and then 343, this internal Microsoft studio, stepped in and they took over and they did a remaster of Halo 1, and then they kind of continued on with Halo 4, 5, Infinite, and the Master Chief Collection. And everyone has sort of hated or been excessively critical, I think, of 343. And it's weird because Halo has kind of struggled to find its footing. But I also thought that, you know, most of the post-Bungie games are actually like a lot better than they get credit for. Like, I think Halo 4 and 5 and Infinite are all really good in their own ways. But the way everyone sort of turned on Infinite was bizarre, because that game came out with a fair bit of hype and was pretty well received, actually. But it just, I think, was a little bit light on content, even though it, from what I understand, and I played a little bit of the multiplayer, I just had kind of grown away from competitive multiplayer at the time, but that's sort of what had been keeping Halo alive. As much as I always enjoyed the campaigns, that's just, I don't know, that's where the game was, and everyone moved on from it to Call of Duty. But Infinite came out and people really liked it, but it just had weird little technical issues. Like the netcode, I think, was kind of hit or miss in places, and people just like tore the game up. And also the management of it. So it was part of this wave of, I guess, a new trajectory for Microsoft games where they were putting out like Halo Infinite and the new Forza Motorsport that they were talking about using as platforms for the series, and they were going to support them for like a decade on, and this was just going to be the platform you go to play new Halo content, which there was going to be a bunch of it, and that just kind of didn't happen with Infinite. Yeah, and I guess they're trying to turn that around. From what I understand, they've been saying that the engine that they built for it was just a bear to try and onboard people to try and get them, acclimated to actually creating content for. And they're hoping that this switch to Unreal Engine 5 will allow them to move through the process more smoothly and more consistently put out Halo video game stuff, which would be cool. But it's like Halo has just fallen so far from relevance. I don't really know how, and I don't know, maybe it could come back, but like Infinite seemed like the big sort of nostalgia grab for Halo and the chance for it to really reclaim its spot as something that people actually care about. Then that just sort of didn't happen. I don't know.
So wasn't there some stuff with Infinite when they were trying to promo and like put out some footage, and like some of the models looked really bad and janky. Like they showed some of the open world combat, and I feel like people were dunking on that for a while.
Oh, they were dunking on it hard. They didn't really show it in the best light. There was this one brute that they showed, and you got a close up of his face, and it wasn't good looking. It was also just a bad way to demonstrate the game, because you were like really, really close up on this guy's face in a way that you may do in the actual game, but just for like a fraction of a second as you're meleeing them or something. And people just kind of took it and ran. And the game also had kind of like a more cartoony type of vibe to it, which Halo always had, but they were using it to show off like the new realistic lighting and ray tracing and all that stuff. And it didn't look great. Like it honestly looked like kind of a step down from Halo 5 in terms of just shiny graphical fidelity. And so they had to go back and rework a lot of that before release. And the game got delayed. It just, the whole rollout of it was kind of a mess.
Well, it seems like that happens a lot when these sort of series like try to go into this open world design, and it's like a lot more taxing on processing power and all that. So they have to like sort of cut corners and make things work, push down the quality of certain elements. I know it looked better upon release, but trying to optimize a game that's so large and open like that. Cause like, I would say I kind of noticed that with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Remake Rebirth. I'm already getting them confused. So yeah, it's interesting that they were like kind of fighting an uphill battle there and trying to make an open world game that wasn't really received that well for being open world. I know Halo has always had that open mission format, but I think that works better,
It was, and it's weird because Infinite wasn't even really open world. It had like 3 or so kind of open areas that were like miniature open world maps, and it was bookended by these big linear missions.
Okay.
But also like, I don't know, the big linear missions are what people remember from Halo. It's had a couple that were kind of more open that people liked, but it was always these big like linear set pieces that kind of made the game. And I don't know, Infinite I do think was actually good. And the other reason I wanted to talk about this is Unreal Engine 5 kind of taking over the industry and everyone moving towards it. And I don't know entirely how I feel about that, because for as much as it seems to be a managerial nightmare and I wouldn't want to actually work on the games, I do feel like 343 has had consistently great feeling engines with the Halo games. Like Halo 4, 5, and Infinite all just feel really, really snappy and responsive and just good to play in a way that I don't know that any Unreal Engine games manage. They always seem to have that like weird little bit of like input lag or poor optimization or something. And I don't know how much of that is a result of the engine versus the work the developers put into it or what. But that kind of worries me because that's one of the things that Halo still really has going for it.
Right. And so like I would say as an outsider too, beyond like the original Halo trilogy and like what little I know of like Reach, it seems like, I don't know, like I'm overwhelmed with like what the fuck is the canon? Like how does someone jump into these games too? And I think it's interesting that they're trying to like sort of pitch like a reboot on top of like an engine flip. Yeah, like trying to get like a little, like see if people are excited about it. But, and then we have that shot of Master Chief and people are saying he looks like a woman now. What a wild time to be like.
God, that's, yeah. I don't even know what they try to do with the story because the story was done.
Right.
When Bungie ended, it was done. And then how they continued it in 4 and 5 and Infinite was a mess. They just dove like really deep into the fucking like grognard hardcore online nerd lore of the books, which could be interesting. Like I read some of the Halo books when I was younger and they were surprisingly good for a video game tie-in adaptation novel, not setting the bar too high, but they were actually decent. Like it has a pretty involved world, but the way they tied it into the games required all of this outside knowledge, or it became this kind of inscrutable just fucking mess of like proper nouns and characters and events in history that you didn't give a shit about. And then after setting up all this stuff in Halo 5, they completely fucking flaked on all of that and basically did a soft reboot in Halo Infinite, like completely ignoring everything that had happened in 5 and everything that was set up. And now they're talking about doing another soft reboot. And it's like, I don't really know where they go unless they literally just do a hard reboot and like remake Halo 1 and retell Master Chief's story, which I also don't think is really a good idea. So I don't know.
Yeah, that seems like it could blow up in your face real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really know where the series goes. I don't even have any attachment to that series at all anymore, and I don't really know what it like that it still needs to exist, but
you're going to anger someone with that one. Yeah, someone's upset that you just said that. Not me, I don't care, but
Money probably disagrees. Yeah, look, I was at one point like one of the world's biggest Halo fans, which is not a thing. That's not a claim I share proudly, but like I met a lot of friends in like my Halo 2 clan that I legit still talk to today. My wife and I's first date, here's some deep background Drew lore. Our first date, we had some 1v1s on Halo 2.
Nice. Yes. And I shot her down, man.
I fucking did. I didn't let her win shit.
Can't do that.
And somehow she still married me, so whatever.
Well played, well played.
So yeah, that's I don't know. Future looks weird for Halo. It's weird that stuff is still happening. I mean, if they can kind of turn it back around to something that matters again and it's like a system seller, that would be cool. Like I said, I actually think that all of the games 343 has put out are good and better than they get credit for. I just don't know where it goes. Like I don't know. It's interesting. I understand their decision for moving to Unreal Engine 5, but as a player, I'm not excited about it.
I think like it seems like they're a competent enough studio to pull off something like this. But yeah, with this franchise, it seems very tricky. It seems like a lot of the like diehards want like the nostalgia, like they want classic Halo. So I don't know. I hope they can do something cool with it, but for like someone like me, it's gonna have to be like pretty substantial to like draw me into Halo.
Yeah. But I don't really have any strong concluding thoughts on Halo. I just wanted to throw that out there for a couple minutes. Another thing, so I haven't been as in tune with this, but Josh, you want to say a few words about the Remedy news that's happening?
Yeah, Remedy's been making like a lot of moves lately. They've had a lot of activity on like all of their socials and announcements. So we have Firebreak, the FBC Firebreak announcement, which is going to be like a 3-player horde shooter co-op type game. it's a very interesting choice that they're going with like a first person co-op game. It seems like sort of a mix between like Left 4 Dead and Helldivers or something like that. Generic kind of put together like DIY characters, like they've got like gas masks and aprons and like little kind of fudged together tech and stuff like that. It also looks like they're kind of recycling like a lot of assets and like maps and areas from the original Control game. So and
Yes.
enemies, of course, like the hiss are there. It looks like there's more variety of stuff, but it's interesting. Like I'm not sure like what exactly they're trying to catch with this. I thought this would be a thing that they kicked around and ended up like canceling, sort of like the way it went down with Factions 2 for The Last of Us. So yeah, I don't know. I like what I'm seeing. Like I would play it. I can't say I'm like super excited that there's like this side game in a universe that is so like narratively driven. I think that's probably my biggest qualm with it. It does look kind of fun and crazy. But yeah, I don't know. Like they've been rolling out all this good stuff for like Alan Wake 2 and like stacking new characters and narratives and tying everything together like ever since Control. So I'm not sure why they're doing this, but I hope it goes well for them either way.
It looks way more interesting than I would have expected from a gameplay perspective. I like how they're kind of working in these objects of power as things that you can use as like weapons. So they have like the gnome that you shoot at people and these weird like goo cannons and shit that I'm assuming have some kind of lore. I don't know. It does look semi-interesting. I have zero interest in ever playing this game.
So that's what I was saying to you before we started recording. Like, I hope that this is small scale.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this needs to be an ongoing, like, running thing. I hope it's kind of like a small pick up and go type of game. I'm worried because we know that Tencent is involved with Remedy Entertainment, and like they're getting involved with a lot of game studios right now. I've yet to see, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I've yet to see it like impact like on a micro transactional level. And this seems like the perfect game to do that too. So I'm a little bit afraid they're going to like add that kind of element as well.
Yeah, I really hope they don't. Like, I feel like Remedy as a studio would have enough integrity to avoid that. But if they're going to, this would be the perfect vehicle. And the other thing, I mean, kind of piggybacking on what you said, I mentioned, I think in our Control episode, that universe and that setting would be perfect for smaller offshoot games exploring these different concepts that they brought up within that universe. I would never in a million years have wanted that to be a multiplayer horde shooter.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Like side stories and other approaches to like the Control or Alan Wake universe. Like I think that's cool, but this is just not where I saw it going.
Yeah, and a studio that has built their entire reputation on these big high concept single player stories. It's fine for them to step out and try something different, but especially now that big high concept single player adventures are coming back into vogue a little, for them to step away and do this weird sort of trendy looking, although again, I mean, I think it looks interesting enough that it stands out from the others. Like, I don't think it's a copycat game necessarily, but like to see them step away from the thing that they do so well that also happens to be a thing that people are buying right now into a thing that they are completely untested at, that the world is getting bored with, is odd to me.
Yeah, I agree. I would say the only thing I really like, looking at the trailer again, it kind of reminds me of like a Valve game. And that makes, and maybe it's just the setting and like how
it's just the gnome
and like all the guns, like how the guns are all like scrapped together technology. Like it makes me kind of like it more the longer I look at it. But yeah, I would say if this comes out as like a $70 game, I'm going to be kind of like probably tilt my head at it, you know?
Like, honestly, just for what I enjoy playing, even if it's free to play, I'm not going to touch it. But I do hope it does well. I like Remedy. They seem like good people. I'm not like trying to shit on the game. I don't think it looks terrible. It just looks so far removed from what I would enjoy and what I would like to see that studio doing. But again, they don't have to do things for me. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. I don't want Remedy to get in trouble. I want them to do well.
Yeah.
I want Alan Wake 3. It seems like they're really getting there pretty quickly with how many different like DLC chapters. I just picked up the Lake House DLC for Alan Wake 2. I still haven't played the Night Springs DLC. So like there's a bunch of content that they've packed into a game that I already enjoyed as like a full length title. So I got to work on that and try to get there. But I'm hearing good things about it. Yeah. So that's always, that's always nice to hear. Speaking of companies buying Tencent or Tencent buying into companies.
Companies being bought for 10 cents.
10 cents, yes.
Yeah, Ubisoft is in kind of a weird death spiral. Like one of the biggest and most, I guess, striking ones I can remember for a huge AAA studio like that.
Yeah.
One thing, they dissolved the studio that made Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which kind of sucks. Yeah, I don't think they actually fired any of the people, which is good. I think they just kind of rolled them out into other projects, which I guess is a very faint praise for Ubisoft, but good for Ubisoft, I suppose. But yeah, that was a game that got very well received critically, although apparently the sales weren't good enough, I suppose. And so, yeah, more good things that we're not allowed to have. But they're also kind of like, they seem to be having a lot of financial trouble. Like Assassin's Creed Shadows is getting a lot of shit online and seems to be having some development issues, maybe. So within the span of a couple of weeks, they delayed the game to next year. They canceled the early access period. They dropped their, I guess, like season pass or battle pass, whatever they're calling it on their type of plans. And they slashed the price on the most expensive version of the game by like in half. And there's reports floating around of their stock price plummeting and all this stuff. And Star Wars Outlaws got kind of mixed reviews, although the tide seems to be coming back around to, faint positivity, I guess, on that game from what I can see. But it underperformed their expectations in terms of sales. So Ubisoft is just not having a good time, it seems like.
Well, see, that metric of sales for them always seems crazy and unrealistic. And yeah, they try to forecast ahead and say that like this side scroller game needs to sell like 5 million or whatever. And yeah, it's a smaller scale game that's more focused. It's probably one of the tighter Ubisoft titles that have come out in a long time. And yeah, I mean, it's true to form with Prince of Persia. And then they like start throwing in other Prince of Persia projects and all this stuff. Like they're already confusing like the focus of their games, like as they come out. Yeah, apparently they moved that staff off of like the Lost Crown team to help with development on other projects, which is probably connected to the AC Shadows problem. So yeah, they've just been really sloppy, and we see a lot of content, people like really calling them out. I had heard something about they used like Chinese assets or like structures within Assassin's Creed Shadows. And some people were some people were pretty pissed off about that. It sounds like a mistake that anyone could make, but it also makes me question, like, because they've always been that company with Assassin's Creed that's like, this game is made by a team of multicultural and like multilingual like people and
diverse people with a variety of sexualities and religious views and political beliefs,
but they don't have someone giving them like a cultural perspective on Japan. Like that seems a little questionable. Pirate Ubisoft games, no, don't do that.
This is not official bastard sword advice.
Don't do what I might also be doing.
Well, it's been weird to watch such a huge fixture in the gaming industry kind of spiral out of control like that very quickly, actually. Just within like a couple months, it went from like an absolute titan of the industry to, holy fuck, is this company actually going to go away? And I don't think it's going to, but they're definitely having some not happy meetings at the upper level there, I would say.
I mean, I think they need to scale back, and you know, with like the development cycles of these games, like they need to know when to call it. Like if they have so many teams working on that fucking Skull and Bones or whatever it was, you know, they need to, if they're going to forecast all these things with like sales and reception, then they just need to try to make games that are more involved for their audience. And to me, generic pirate simulator is definitely not that. Again, Assassin's Creed Shadows, just make it Tenchu and I will buy it.
We've said many times, I've talked many times on here about how it seems like modern AAA development is just unsustainable, and this just seems to be an inevitable result of that. So hopefully they can restructure and figure shit out. I actually like a lot of Ubisoft games more than probably a lot of the angry internet video game critics, which I guess I probably am one of those. But I would like to see them turn things around and be able to get their shit together. So hopefully this gives them the impetus to do that.
Definitely.
But let's talk about some games that are good.
Josh,
good? You've been playing a good game lately, haven't you?
I think so. I feel like it's pretty good. I see a lot of high praise for it right now too. So my question to you is, like, you've never played any of the Persona games or like Shin Megami Tensei games, have you?
None of those.
So I mean, like, they're pretty. Persona games have been going on since like early PC days. Started as like they were pretty efficient in like dungeon crawlers, and now we've kind of come full circle to Metaphor ReFantazio, or however you want to pronounce that, which is like such a weird game title, and there are like honestly a lot of elements to this game that I probably would have shrugged off and just not been interested in if I didn't know about like Atlus's track record with the Persona games and associated IPs. So yeah, Metaphor is really good. I picked up the demo before release. It's about like how long was it? Like a 5-hour demo?
It's a pretty long demo.
Yeah, it gives you a decent amount of the prologue to get an idea of how the game is structured, how the combat works, etc., etc. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a very fantastical JRPG. The difference here is like Persona games take place in like Tokyo, usually like real modern time or somewhere around modern times. And then there's like a fantasy world that's connected to everything and affects everything. And so in this game, it's more just one world. Like there's, I think, 5 races of different quote unquote people. And then they are plagued by demons. This is like the cheesiest part of it for me, but like the destructive demons that come out and fuck up the world are called humans. It's like such a fucking anime thing to do, but
it was humans all along.
Yeah, and like it fucks with me when like they use it in the context of the dialogue. They'll be like, a human did this. I'm like, no shit. Oh yeah, sorry. Like I forgot. But despite some of the silliness of like the characters and the presentation, the core cast is like really good. Character portraits are good. Persona is like really known for having great music. And this like follows tradition there, except it's instead of like guitars and like dance beats, it's like actual fantasy, like RPG oriented music. It's got a really tight turn-based battle system, which is nice to see that we're coming like back to those games being viable and interesting. It's got like a lot of Final Fantasy nostalgia for me, like playing 7, 8, and 9 as a kid. And like the presentation of this game is like very portrait based sometimes. Like it's obviously 3D models, but they use a lot of different art styles. It's very visually heavy and crazy all the time. And when all these things come together, it turns into like a really fun, addictive experience of like dungeon crawling, turn-based battles, interacting with your allies and buying new equipment, getting items, having like supplies and stuff like that. But I don't know. They just made a pretty fun like marriage of all these things. And maybe I'm not selling it properly, but if you do get a chance, check out the Metaphor demo. It's pretty involved and it picks up after the demo. Like I'd say like a lot of JRPGs are this way, but like once the brakes are off, like you actually have the full game and you can access things a little bit more freely. And yeah, it's very long too. It's about, I think that it's clocking in about 120 hours.
That's kind of what I've been seeing. Yeah. And it does seem like a lot of JRPGs have a kind of long onboarding process. And that's sort of just why I haven't played like any of the Personas or Shin Megami Tenseis. They've all been sort of on my radar as long as those series have been around. I just have never... The time commitment is always a hurdle for me to clear. And it's not like I don't put that amount of time into other games. It's just like knowing that I'm going to have to put 10 hours in before it really opens up. It always kind of scares me away a little. Although, as I understand from what you've said and just from the impressions I've seen, this seems like it's pretty freaking great right out of the gate and then just only gets better. From what I'm seeing and hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like I don't really understand what the big hook is with this in terms of the story or gameplay, which isn't meant as a condemnation, just that it seems like it's just a really, really well executed kind of standard JRPG. Am I way off base on that?
No, you're not. I would say the main focus of the story that I've kind of left out because it's sort of revealed in the prologue is that there's like a coup happening in the central royalty, and there's a guy who's trying to place himself as like a tyrant monarch and take over. But the king who's been assassinated set up a contingency to like find a proper noble king. And then you were kind of like in a political race on top of everything else going on.
Yeah.
So there's like that factor. There's a lot of mystery going on, like things that like outside of just like the humans, like there's all the different races and their interactions and like racism and like there's societal stuff going on. I mean, It's playing a lot on like the things they did well in Persona 5 and then just like refining them. But yeah, like the main catch is like you're the hero, you're the chosen one, but you're trying to save the prince who is like fallen into some sort of like spell cast slumber. So like there's a lot of slow trickle with the story and how it develops, and even like the new characters that enter your party, like it's all stacking up towards something. And I don't really know what that something is yet. So I think that's kind of fun, though. Like, I like that element of it.
Yeah, definitely. And from what I've seen, it looks like the monster designs are pretty interesting. It seems to lean in a little bit more of a fucked up, like Lovecraft type of horror direction with some of these, and still what seems like a pretty light anime type of feel. This doesn't look like it's a super dark game, but a lot of the monsters seem actually kind of pretty messed up from what I've seen. Like, more limbs than you would expect, and eyes and tentacles in places that they shouldn't be, and things like that. Yeah,
there's definitely something going on. And then there's like more cartoony, like generic JRPG type enemies, like there's skeletons and other guys that you fight, and then monsters. And then the like quote unquote humans are all like taken from Bosch paintings.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they all have like something that's nabbed, like one character from a really like busy Bosch painting, which is like one of the main bosses you fight toward the end of the first dungeon. So like that stuff's kind of like weird and off-putting in an interesting way. Like I like when a JRPG can like throw in things that like make me like kind of tilt my head and be like, what the fuck is this? Story wise, it is darker than probably most of the Persona games. Like people get fucking murdered and killed in this world. So it's definitely going a slightly darker, but It also has a lot of brevity and ups and downs in the story.
Yeah, and what I've heard is the pacing, despite it being like 100-hour game, actually doesn't drag in the way that a lot of JRPGs can.
Yeah, like the Persona games for me, I have a real bad time with like optimizing everything that I do. And you're given like a certain amount of days on a calendar to complete a task or clear a dungeon or do something like that. You're given the choice to manage your time interacting with other things or going to town or traveling. So there's all these like factors to put in. But for me, I do it to myself because I clear a dungeon and then I have like 9 days to kill. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah. I could have like done half of the dungeon, but yeah, that's my personal issue. But I would say pacing wise, I like it much more than Persona 3 remake and probably more than Persona 5 because Persona 5 took me way too long to beat. Like it took me 2 years to like finally finish it.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in checking it out. You were trying to sell me on it, and you would have succeeded if not for the game that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. But yes, it is cool that it seems like there have been a lot of good JRPGs coming out recently. Like there seems to be a little bit of a renaissance happening with those and some interesting turn-based games coming out soon. Like I know we talked about that, Expedition 33 and yes. There's been some more stuff coming out on it, and it still looks really interesting too. So
that game has a really nice Persona look going on too. I feel like they're inspired somewhat by the Persona games, and yeah, I like that vibe.
Yeah, JRPG fans eating good right now.
And it's like if you like Baldur's Gate 3 and you like anime, then maybe it'll work.
I do intend to dive into that, and we could do a full episode on it. It seems like it could support more than one full episode.
Yeah, we could beat it within a year.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. We'll work on it. I still haven't quite beat the game I'm going to talk about either, which is Silent Hill 2, the remake.
And it's good.
It's very good, actually. So we, and me especially, were very critical of this game on an earlier episode, but it came out and I think kind of surprised everyone with all the really good reviews and early impressions it was getting. So I know I specifically mentioned on this podcast that like there was no way it was going to be a day one purchase for me.
Right.
And then it turns out I lied and it was a day one purchase for me. So
they got you. Yeah, I feel like I was on team hate and doubt for this remake. And I am glad to hear that people like it. I have not experienced it for myself yet, but it's good to know that it's being received well. And hopefully that means good things for the franchise in general. Because we can actually get like some good Silent Hill games back in the catalog.
Yeah, like it is so much better than any of the pre-release marketing material was. I don't know if that was just a Konami thing or what, but everything they presented just made the game look as bad as it possibly could and not really anything like the experience of actually playing it. Like, I have been very, very impressed and very happy with it. I actually just got a PlayStation 5. I'm always really late to Sony consoles. This is probably the earliest I've jumped in on a Sony ecosystem since like the PlayStation 2, which I got around the time it released. And yeah, this was the first game I got for it. So I've been enjoying my PlayStation 5 experience so far. But yeah, Silent Hill 2, they completely nailed the atmosphere, like to an extent that I think that's one of the things that we generally were fairly positive on, even with the pre-release stuff, like how it looked walking around town and stuff.
Yeah.
But like even just seeing that in a trailer doesn't really convey how good it is and how much they actually did nail that. Like the sound design, which again, I know I was pretty critical of from the brief snippets we got, is fucking incredible.
That's what I keep hearing. That I was a big sound design hater. And to hear that everyone's saying like the sound design is good and immersive is like, fuck yeah, I'm happy that worked out because I was getting really nervous.
No, yeah, it has that just horrible like industrial crunch and cacophony of just all these fucking horrible sounds happening all the time all around you, and it's so intense and unnerving and off-putting in all of the best ways. And like I mentioned, I just got a PS5, so the discussion of the haptics on the controller and like the high def vibration and whatever, that kind of feedback, I know I am a few years late to that, but it's used really, really well in this game. And so the radio, the Silent Hill static, and I guess I take for granted that everyone knows Silent Hill 2 just because it's such a fixture of gaming, but I suppose I'll explain some of these basics just for anyone who may not, because, I mean, 20-year-old game, so a lot of people are just, this is their first experience with it, but
yeah.
You have a radio that plays static anytime monsters get near, and how it's handled in the remake, it plays through the speaker and the controller, which is a really good use of that. And, like, a lot of the environmental cues and everything play in with the haptics and the controller. So like there's a part in one of the hotels early on where you come in and there's a piano playing this, like, not a piano, there's a radio playing this like really melancholic and kind of like FM radio distorted piano ballad. And you can feel like the distortion and the high notes of the piano kind of like resonating through the controller subtly. And it's so effective at drawing you into the atmosphere. And yeah, the way they have all of like the environmental like chain rattling and just like clunks and this mechanical banging and stuff, and a lot of that is communicated through the controller too. Like Pyramid Head walking, you can feel that his giant sword like scraping through the controller and everything. It all ties together so freaking well.
I was telling a friend who was playing it, and we were talking about this with other games on the PS5 as well, but I turned that feature off so fucking quickly.
Really?
I've always hated audio coming out of the controller. I don't know why. I mean, I primarily play with a headset these days, which has made everything like way more immersive for me in general, but I just always thought that was annoying, like it because of how tinny that little speaker is.
Oh, it is. It usually sounds terrible, but that weird tinniness actually really works with the like shrill static of the radio.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. The controller audio and motion blur are like the first things I turn off with a new game. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Okay, well, one more thing on the sound design, and then I'll get to my other point. But
yeah,
we talked shit on the gun sounds.
Yes.
And I think we were mostly actually like right about that. The gun sounds on their own are not really good. Like they're a little flat. They're not as loud and violent as you would think, but the combat still works, and the gun sounds, hearing them in isolation or removed from the situation, like in a trailer, makes them sound way worse than they are in practice, because when you're playing the game, you're not just hearing the gun sounds, which again in isolation aren't great, but it really is that intense like unholy cacophony of all these fucking noises and this weird like slumbering monster like squishing and puking vomit at you while your controller is going in your face, and like you're trying desperately to shoot this thing in the leg so you could go bash it or whatever. And it really is intense, like because of the sound design. And even though the specific gun sounds themselves probably could do with being a little louder, they are a good complement to everything else that's working. Like they actually work well with the overarching sound design in a way that genuinely surprised me.
I see how that could work really well. I did read something where they had suggested that the guns were loud and dangerous sounding, and I mean, I'm a little disappointed to hear they didn't improve that, but like revisiting Alan Wake 2, I'm like, man, these guns are like, when they go off, it's like alarming. But I see how they could still make that work with like good sound design, the enemies, the background music, all that shit happening at once.
They're enough, like it adds to the chaos. And even though like just shooting the gun in isolation does not sound as intense as it should. They sound intense enough to add to the experience.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I've heard they optimized like some of the boss fights, so it's not just like smack a guy with a stick in a room for 20 times until he dies.
I mean, sort of. So, yeah, a couple things. I'll come back to the boss fight. I'm going to say this before it leaves my goldfish brain. The graphics are fucking incredible. I just talked shit on Unreal Engine 5. This is an Unreal Engine 5 game. It does have, like, this is not the most snappy and responsive feeling game you will ever play, but it doesn't matter. It's Silent Hill. I mean, it never has been.
Yeah.
Graphically, it's just incredible. The level of detail, the amount of grime, the design of everything, the design of all the decay, the regular world and the hell world. It looks so fucking good. This is probably the only game I've ever played where I actually keep it in quality mode as opposed to performance mode, just because of a few different reasons. I mean, the performance mode still looks really good, but it also, like, running at 30 frames per second doesn't hurt this type of game. Like, this is one of the very, very, very few situations where I'll say that kind of grittier performance almost adds to the atmosphere. And like when I switch it over to performance mode for a little bit, just seeing these things coming at you in this like crystal clear 60 frames per second was actually took away from the experience for me a little, weirdly enough. And
yeah,
it doesn't take away a ton, but just the little bit of extra atmosphere and lighting quality and everything that's taken away that by the performance mode does detract from the overall just fucking disgusting oppressive atmosphere of this game that it does so incredibly well. Like I am in love with how this game looks.
We did say the environments look pretty decent. I thought the mocap looked pretty good, and what I've seen from like just little cutscenes and clips online, like it looks like they really nailed like the facial animations and yeah, like the character textures, all the design elements involved in that look solid. So yeah, and you know, to comment on Metaphor, like it has like some decent graphics, but it also has some like low quality graphics in areas that they're easy for me to dismiss because they're like one-off things or just little like Japanese companies seem to do this. But yeah, I'm glad that like everything is rich and consistent with Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, and this is one of the genres where that really, really, really adds to it. Like that just deep kind of fucked up psychological horror type of area where just, I don't know, pour as much fucking detail and art direction and everything into that as you can. It really adds to the experience of making you feel like you are trapped in this just god awful, horrible place.
I've heard the dungeons are like the main locations like feel isolating in the proper way. Like you're in this dark, dank building for like an extended period of time and you feel like confined and isolated.
It's genuinely like unsettling. I feel like I am very immune to, or I've built up a tolerance for horror stuff, horror media in general. Like things don't really get to me, and it's incredible that this game, like playing it alone in the dark, like at a loud volume, actually like fucks with me in the same way that the original game did like 25 years ago when I was a teenager. It's crazy. Like it's so immersive. The places are just so oppressive feeling. You're like, oh god, I don't even want to push forward, but like I've got to, because what else am I gonna do? Like you get that feeling in your gut of like, oh shit, what, literally like finding a locked door is relieving, and then when you find an unlocked one going through there, it's just like, oh god, what is gonna be in here? Even though like it's insane because obviously, I played the original game on release. I've played it a handful of times since then. I know exactly like where all of this is going. And the fact that it is so effective at building that dread of not knowing what's coming, even when you literally know exactly what's coming. It's just, it is wild.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I like, that's what always made the first Dead Space and the remake like work really well. Is just like this incredible sound design in these like tight spaceship hallways, and you could hear them crawling around and you could hear shit falling, and that always just made you like on edge the entire time. And like, that's what a horror game needs, right?
I don't think Silent Hill 2 remake is perfect. I think it is fantastic, and it's a minor miracle that we are getting a Silent Hill game this good in the year of our Lord 2024. Boss fights are one of the things that I don't really know for sure how I feel about them. Like, objectively, they're better, but they're also better in a way that is kind of weird with the tone of the game. So, like, the first Pyramid Head boss fight, I guess spoilers for people who may not know that you fight Pyramid Head, whatever. So it has more of like a Dark Souls arena, and just given the fact that this is a third person over the shoulder game that is a little more fluid and a little more involved from a gameplay perspective, like, you can actually, there's a dodge button. You can dodge, you have iframes. You're not doing like a full goofy Dark Souls roll, but I mean, in practical terms, it's not really that different from that. And it just feels a little weird. Like, we'll use our old cheesy ludonarrative dissonance term when you're playing as James, like, Dark Souls dodging through Pyramid Head's giant sword swings and stuff. And it's a little bit goofy, but I don't know how I would do it better. I mean, the boss fights are always a little goofy in these games. I don't think it like takes away from the experience, but it's just a little like, I don't know, man.
The old crouch and sidestep. That's pretty much what he does, right?
Yeah.
Like steps through an attack or around an attack. I thought there was like some puzzle element they added to one of the bosses. They added more depth to something, as something I read.
Probably. Like, I've only got through 2 boss fights. So I'm like halfway through the prison. So I've fought Pyramid Head, and I don't remember the name of the boss in the hospital. The like dude strapped to the table that drops through the ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
And that fight, well, both of the fights are a lot different than the ones in the original game. I don't know that they're necessarily more or less puzzly. They're just kind of, they're different in ways that make sense with the new gameplay, which I guess I didn't really talk about. Gameplay's good. It's not like Resident Evil, the new Resident Evil games, not like the Resident Evil 2 remake where it is satisfying to like shoot zombies just because it feels satisfying to shoot zombies, but it's frantic, it's weighty, it works with the game, and feels in line with the nature of Silent Hill. So I'm generally for it. I don't think it's like an in-depth and satisfying enough combat system to have these big elaborate boss fights, but so far the ones that I've gone through, like, they do what they need to. The designs work well enough. I mean, they're intense enough, even if, like I said, I had a little bit of a, okay, this is just kind of goofy feeling with the Dark Souls presentation of the first Pyramid Head boss, but generally I don't have real complaints with them. I think, like I said, overall I could pick a few nits about the game. There are little things that don't necessarily work for me. Some of the new lore notes they've added I kind of don't fully buy into, but a lot of them I do, and like, on balance, it is just incredible how well they pulled this off, and I am both excited and borderline dreading continuing to push through to the end of it. So yeah, Silent Hill 2 remake, we were wrong.
Yeah, and at least we can admit that too. Like, if we're dunking on something that turns out to be good, but you know, like you said, it seemed like their presentation of the trailers and all that made the game look worse than it actually is. So, you know, and I was talking to a friend about this. Like, I'm not a super long time Silent Hill fan like you probably are. Like, I didn't really get around to playing like the original games when they came out. I did play some of them when they came out for like the PS3 HD collection.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I've been told those are inferior for whatever reason, framing and little things they changed, but I've wanted this franchise to do well for a long time, so I'm glad we're getting a good game, and like, hopefully that's a good precedent for like coming titles. Silent Hill F, maybe. That's what I want to hear.
I'm very interested to see where Silent Hill F goes from here, and I don't know how much to read into how good this one is, because F is, of course, an entirely different team. The concept of it looked cool, like the promotional art and everything looked interesting, But I don't know. I hope Silent Hill can come back. I think Bloober has come out and said that they would be open to doing more remakes or even an original Silent Hill game, which they clearly have proven themselves more than capable of. So I'd be interested in that. But for now, I'm just going to be happy that, yeah, Silent Hill is back, kind of ish, for a little bit.
For now, yeah. I mean, it seems like Konami is, surprisingly, like, I'm shocked to say this, but like, they might be doing right by their remakes. Everything that we're seeing for MGS Delta seems to be good and like on the money for what I want for an MGS3 remake. So I don't know if their guiding hand is how much involvement like they have with this Bloober game. So, but if they have the foundation, it seems like it'd be pretty easy for them to do a remake of 1 or, I mean, eventually 3 now. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm open to seeing what happens from here. And Bloober actually has just announced a new game. It seems like they have kind of like, I don't know what their studio setup is, but something that they were kind of working on. I have to imagine contemporaneously with this to some extent, or at least during the polishing stage, which looks kind of interesting. It's like a sci-fi horror game. I haven't played any other Bloober things.
It looks like BioShock 2.
Yeah.
You play as Big Daddy.
Exactly. The Big Daddy game we didn't know we needed.
Yes.
Hopefully not featuring Adam Sandler.
Oh, just a funny comment that I passed over the other day, but it was something to the effect of, who knew that you could just tell Bloober to make a good game? And
I know. That's all it took.
And that was all it took for them to make a decent game, because what I've heard of their other titles is not great, but I've never personally played Medium or anything else.
I haven't either. I've seen a little bit of that whole critical reevaluation going on of their back catalog, just because people were like, wait, were they actually good all along? And the consensus seems to be that no, they weren't. But I don't know. I thought the Medium looked kind of cool, actually. I never played it, so.
Well, I mean, either way, if it helps them as a studio, if it draws attention to their other games, hopefully, you know, within their structure, like studio office or whatever, that like they can continue to make quality games, whether or not they're remakes or whatever. So, you know, I'm willing to give them a shot if they can keep doing that.
Yeah, definitely. They have earned my interest and at least a little bit of, I don't know about trust. They've earned my goodwill from this.
Right.
Also, the last thing I'll say on this, there's a lot that we could say, but I'm sure we will do a full episode on this eventually. But one other thing, we talked about this being Unreal Engine 5, blah, blah, blah. One of the benefits of that has been the modding and the memes that I've been seeing pop up, which my favorite one, of course, the one that's going around is, this is Silent Hill without the fog. And it just looks like a little town in Pennsylvania, which is whatever. My favorite is where they replaced the 2x4 weapon with the model of Mary.
Yeah, just bonking monsters with his dead wife.
Yes, it's incredible. Great. Yeah, I love it.
I thought you were going to say your favorite was the Naked James mod with his dong out.
I miss the Naked James dong mod. I've seen a lot of Leon Kennedy and Ada Wong mods, but
it took like 2 seconds.
Of course it did. The next generation UE5 James dong.
Yeah.
All right. Silent Hill 2. Good game. Metaphor. Good game. A lot of good games happening. Some potentially good games happening in the future. Probably some bad games, but a lot of things happening. So, yeah, we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you all. Do we want to announce what we're trying to do next?
Yeah, sure. We could talk about it real quick.
Cool. Yeah. So we're going to play around with something resembling a format change and try to lean into video stuff. So I have been hosting a podcast at my day job a little bit. We built like an actual video studio. We got a full like 3 camera setup and all that kind of stuff. It's not like a, super high end studio or anything, but it is a video thing. And I think we're going to raid that and try to see what Bastard Sword looks like when you can see our faces.
Yeah, we're kind of thinking like a shorter format video review discussion. And yeah, you'll have to see us physically on camera, which, could be good or bad depending on your reception. But we'll cut in some video game footage and other things for fun there.
Yeah, it'd be something more resembling an actual YouTube series, I think. So we're just going to kind of play around and see where it goes. But I think it'll be fun. Staring at us may be awkward for all parties involved, but we'll get over that. We can do this.
Yeah, hell yeah. And one more thing I wanted to say, Hideo Kojima just posted about Terrifier 3. So,
oh, did he? You just watched that, didn't you?
Yeah, it's great.
Is it? I've never seen any of the Terrifier movies.
They're very schlocky and very over the top with the gore and killing. But once I realized there is actually a running narrative from at least the first 3 Terrifiers, it's good. I like it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I could possibly get around to it eventually. I don't really end up watching a lot of horror movies. When I do, it tends to be the more psychological horror type things. I don't mind the schlocky stuff. It's just not what I usually end up watching.
Yeah, I came in with B movies like that, so it's I'm the opposite of most horror fans.
Yeah,
I'm rooted in these shitty B movies, and I'm like, wait a minute, I love this. Damn. Okay, that's my tangent.
All right, that's the tangent. So That's been the Bastard Sword. Thank you guys. I guess what's our call to action? Oh, likes, subscribes, reviews, those things.
Do it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm Drew. Thank you for listening.
I'm Josh. I'm out. Bye.
Bye.